Hey guys, I'm going to finish up the second half of the fossil fuel value chain. So let's begin. I'm going to get right into the market section of the value chain for crude oil. Just little notes I wanted to make. As crude oil is being shipped to a refinery, it's considered to be done on dirty vessels after it's refined and then sent to the oil product market. That's done via clean vessels. Two points that I want to make clear on here is at the oil refining portion and at the oil product markets section, those are the two areas where competition is created. Refineries will compete with one another to purchase crude oil along with the retailers who sell us gasoline. For the oil market, anyone who's involved with it is going to have some kind of global influence. Here in the United States, we do not produce enough crude oil to meet our consumption needs. And so there has to be consideration to global influences. And the first oil price influencer is a global one, and that's OPEC. That's that conglomerate, or maybe some people call it a cartel, of 13 countries, and they represent about 40% of the crude oil production globally. I think back in 2014, there was a time where the United States, we got pretty good at producing crude oil through sands, which before then was pretty tough. So subsequently, we were producing a bunch of oil. I think Saudi Arabia was the culprit, and they were producing a bunch themselves. And so that flooded the market and really tanked the price of crude oil. And it kind of started this little pointy war of, well, you should have not produced as much. And the other said, well, you shouldn't have produced so much. And it really hurt us. Not us, but it hurt the price of crude oil and those affiliated with it. Natural disasters are also influential to the price of oil. Hurricane Katrina was one that messed with the price of gas about $3 a barrel. COVID was another and more notable influencer, taking it all the way down to negative $40 a barrel. The production costs of oil pumping can also influence the price of oil. Up in Canada, there's a lot of oil sands, and to properly extract that into a product that can be sold is very costly. And when you compare that process to places in the Middle East, you can produce regularly at high rates pretty clean oil at a pretty low cost. Political instability is also another culprit. You can see on the graph the highest spike right here. That was in 2008, and that was during the wars of Afghanistan. And there was some serious political unrest, and that shot the price of gas or of oil all the way up to $136 a barrel. Two small things I just wanted to bring up as well. Here, when we're pricing oil, there's two different indexes that we can use, and that's the West Texas Intermediate or the Brent crude oil. The Brent crude oil is what's used in Europe, and that index prices about 2/3 of the world's crude oil, and then the WTI is what we use here in the United States to price out our barrels. And both of those pretty much align. If one goes up, the other goes up. If one goes down, the other goes down. I wanted to talk briefly about the market value chain post-refinement of crude oil. And it can look two different ways. It can be either sold to retail customers, and this is what we interface with on a weekly basis, where we go to a gas station. The refineries will sell it to Exxon or whoever, and then they'll sell it to us. Or you can have direct sales, and these are business customers that are buying it. So like a thermal plant or airliners, they don't go to gas stations. They'll buy it directly from the refinery in large bulk and have it delivered to their facility or storage tanks. The crude oil sourcing here in the United States, I found this really nice little graph. The blue is our production, the red is our net imports. Solely based off of our high level of consumption, we will always be importing oil from other countries. Up here in the top right corner, you can also see a map that depicts the amount of crude oil that is able to be extracted from those countries. The darker the color, the higher the volume. We can see the United States is pretty low, and based off of, again, like I said, our high level of consumption, that we're just always going to have to be buying oil. We can't satiate our own needs ourselves. The coal market I'm going to talk about as well. Jack did a really good job in his week 3 presentation talking about natural gas and electricity, but I'll cover coal all the way up to the thermal plants, where then they are distributed as utilities. And right here on the side is just another depiction of the coal mining value chain. Here in the United States, it's a little bit different compared to crude oil. We are capable of producing enough coal to meet our needs and don't have to search very much we don't have to rely on imports like we do in crude oil. This top graph shows how much of coal we used based on different sources, and it's no surprise that electrical power is the #1 user of coal. There's been a pretty strong decline since the 2000s. Some of this can be attributed to regulation of coal, but it should still be pretty known that we are still consuming a lot of energy. Down here we can look at the blue and the orange. The blue line is how much we can produce here in the United States. Orange is what we consume. There's one time where our consumption was greater than our production, but you can look down here that our exports, we were still exporting some of it, but very, very little. So again, there's not a huge reliance on foreign imports for our coal. Here we can see the top 5 coal producing states in the US. Go Wyoming, we're #1. I just throw that in there. Since coal does not have quite a global presence like crude oil, particularly when we're able to produce so much of it that we can use for ourselves, the things that really influence the price of coal, we're looking at what type of coal is being mined or what's present in the mine, and then we get into the mining process, and just keeping it really general. We have open pit and underground. Open pit doesn't require as much resources or technology as underground, so open pit mines are going to be a little bit cheaper than underground mines. And then how do we transport it? Here we just show there's railroads is obviously the #1 transporter of coal. Those who are purchasing coal, those thermal plants, are buying in such great quantities that pretty much anything other than railroads is just not as efficient, because you just need so much of it. You just can't transport enough like a train can. I'm going to talk about the benchmarking now for the refining process. I'll have to say this is definitely was a little bit above my pay grade, but I really try to spend some time in this and understand how a refinery benchmarks its skills at refining crude oil. They use, from what I read, is there's something called the Anselm methodology, and it's really a pinch analysis. And what they look at is 12 different energy efficiencies and see how well you're doing in each one of them. Some of those indexes are pretty simple, like how much volume of wasted gas is there, how efficient are you at using utility energy. But a majority of the indexes were looking at heat and how efficiently it was being used in different processes. So how well was vertical heat being utilized, how much waste was there, what loss or impact do hot and cold streams have in these giant plants? And that's really where it started to get a little complicated for me. But it really just boiled down to is how efficient are you using heat? How much waste is there? And then where is that being lost at? The final things that they were looking at is also potential energy loss and reducing energy consumption. The potential energy loss was, on paper, this is what your plant should be doing, and then in reality, this is what it is. So they take those two and minus them or subtract them to find the difference. Here at the top, there's this arrow chart that shows the total capacity consumption and then where all of those different energies are going. And then this can be compared against other refineries or against a standard. Again, this middle bar graph depicts the total specific energy consumption among the different power plants or units. Down here it shows the potential loss or energy saving potential for all the different units. You can see unit 1 was really efficient, so it was very it just wasn't wasting any energy. And all the way to here at 7, you can see that it was not as efficient as 1, and so across all of them it creates this line that shows how much energy is being wasted as we progress through these different power plants. And then finally, with coal, there was a lot of, I'm going to go back a slide for coal. Well, I can't go back, I'm sorry. For coal, there's a lot of similar analysis using the pinch analysis. Some of those heat transfers, especially the vertical heating when they're heating up that crude oil, those are specific to refineries, but for coal it was pretty similar. And then these benchmarkings I want to talk about are for both refineries or thermal plants. And when we're looking at comparing the benchmarks or looking at the process that these plants use, there's financial measures, which are just operational costs, capital costs. There's operational measures, which are, what's your capacity, how much output are you given. There's maintenance measures, how much preventative maintenance are you doing, how much emergency work are you doing, how much rework do you have to go back and do. Then there's planned outage measures and forced outage measures. Planned outages are we've planned to shut it down. Forced is something's happened to shut down the plant. Both of them look at the same criteria. What's your safety performance? What's your outage budget? What's your work scope variance? The second to last is safety measures. Pretty self-explanatory. What are your first aid cases? How many OSHA recorded? What's your rate of OSHA violations? And then your misses, and then your rate of injury-free days. The final is environmental measures, and this is just looking at emissions of gases, spills, amount of hazardous waste produced. And all of these can be, again, combined to analyze an individual plant or refinery to a standard or to competitors in a region. And then I think that's it. I wanted to try to keep this pretty brief for you guys. If you guys have any questions or want me to elaborate on something, you can find me in the discussions. Have a great day, guys.